So now we have the next match. Doryan is going up against Dhan. So far, Dhan is sweeping the team, defeating Asuka because in a close, admittingly close match, just because Asuka really lost a lot of field and advantage really fast and couldn't really get her engine going when she wanted. Shotaro did his best, but he didn't know that the Gold Paladins had their own stride. I really think if he had had the ability to play it would have made a difference. But couldn't have happened. Doryan is now using Gear Chronicles. Not sure if he's using the new Gear Chronicle units, but Gear Chronicles do have new art now, so it's going to be a lot easier to see stuff. Dhan starts by retiring the starter again. Doesn't mean as much in Gear Chronicles, though. At grade 3, Fate Wheel Dragon is written. Now we can Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1 and send a unit to the bottom of the deck. Why aren't you doing that, Doryan? Yeah. He could have Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, and put Judge Bao Revenger to the bottom of the deck, and then he wouldn't have to deal with it for the rest of the game. And now, because he didn't, he's got to deal with it. He's just got to deal with the rest of the game, working around that skill, or just, option B is don't give a damn. Doryan is using a lot of triggers to guard. Using a lot of 10k shields when he really doesn't need to. Because that only needed a 5k block, and he also discarded a heal trigger for the perfect guard. I wonder if he still has Legion in this deck. Because that's the only explanation I can think of for him to be guarding the way he is. Because he really could have just... If Lost Age Dragon is allowed to hit, he'll be able to send a card to the bottom of the deck. But because Dhan wants to keep his Judge Bao Revenger, he's not going to let that hit. Doryan gets a critical trigger. And now Twin Mazer Dragon attacks with 17 to critical. And Dhan lets it hit because he wants Limit Break. Of course, with Doryan being at 2 damage, this is actually pretty advantageous for Doryan himself. Not only that, but Dhan has kind of hard-locked himself out of doing Judge Bao Revenger now, because Judge Bao Revenger will take a counterblast. He uses the Break Rot in order to get out Makart, which on Legion will get out another free unit, but in rest. But since Makart himself gains 5k, he can just put a booster behind Makart at rest. And he basically is his own booster. Chooses to call Doryan to the open rear guard instead, most likely because he's going to unflip a damage with Blaster Dark Revenger in hand. Otherwise, I wouldn't think of why he'd do that at all. No, he calls him Mordred Phantom. I wonder why he gave up a Doryan from in the deck if he wasn't going to do that. He could have just gotten out a Masquerade. Doryan no guards the Vanguard. Dhan doesn't get triggers at all. And there's a new unit for Gear Chronicle. Steam Maiden Ishin. If a unit on the opponent's side is sent from the field to the deck, aka Gear Chronicle ability of sending things to the bottom of the deck, then this unit has the power to Counterblast 1 and give itself a Cannot Guard with Zero's ability. Makart is now hitting for 24k, 3 critical. And Doryan unfortunately has to use another perfect guard just to block it. Now Doryan If Doryan has Stride, Ragnarok might have the ability to end this. He rides Chrono Jet Dragon and does a Stride. Rides Chrono Jet Dragon for the Heart skill. And now Doryan is searching for the unit he wants to stride into and gets Ragnarok. Uses Counterblast 1 and sends Makart to the bottom of the deck, so that takes out the intercept. And he also can't guard with 0, so the double critical he got last turn doesn't mean anything for his ability to defend himself. But he does have a perfect guard. Doryan actually didn't use the skill at all. Interesting. $17k to the Vanguard is blocked. Doryan is still at 3 damage, so he's not exactly in a horrible position. It's not like he lost just because of that. Not to mention that since his opponent double critical this last turn, it decreases his ability to get those kind of triggers on this turn. He does get 1 critical though. Still better than getting 2. Speaking of triggers, Doryan gets a draw. Giving that to the Vanguard means it can't hit the Vanguard. So Dhan attacks the rear. Doryan allowed the rear to be hit. And if I remember right, he did get a... I thought he got a unit that he could use for Stride. No, he did. He just chose not to do it. What the hell? The hell is he doing? Considering what he can do, I actually probably would have went for Mystery Flare there just to see what happens. Just use Mystery Flare, call Apex Standing Gearwolf behind the Vanguard, and use these 2 skills in combination to return the unit to the bottom of the deck, and then unflip. And then get this guy, and then Mystery Flare Dragon, see what happens. It would give a 3rd drive check, which in Doryan's case right now would be very helpful and probably what he needs. But we have to see what happens. Dhan calls a unit behind the Vanguard. Is he going to go straight into battle phase? I think he's looking at his options, contemplating. Dhan does not run 12 critical. And with the amount of criticals he's been getting up to now and how many turns in a row he's done it, the odds of him getting a critical now without Stride are actually not that high. So if he doesn't call anything else, Doryan can do a ballsy no guard and just take the hit. Of course, if a critical does appear, then Doryan would lose if that had to happen. Dhan is just attacking with the Vanguard alone. So we have to see if Doryan has guard or if he's going to no guard. He's at 4 damage now, thanks to the heal trigger. Oh, he has 2 10Ks in hand. He's guarding. Combined with the intercept. No, he's not using the intercept. He's doing a 2-pass. First check is a critical trigger, and second check is not. It was a good 2-pass. So now Doryan uses Draco Kid's skill, putting it into Soul to give a unit 3,000 power. He gives the 3,000 power to Gearwolf and puts a unit behind it so it hits for 15. And now it's going to hit for 18. So that's going to force another 10k shield. So his first attack is for 16. And Dan is looking at his hand, contemplating, deciding does he have the guard for all three. And the biggest one I would say is Colonel Jet Dragon, because with Colonel Jet Dragon's ability, it's gonna gain 5,000 power, and Dan can only guard it with grade 0s. So that's a 2-pass. Doryan gets a draw trigger. He's giving it straight to the Vanguard. And he gets a heal trigger, also gives it to the Vanguard. Doryan hit. And that's the end of the game. Good job, Doryan. You took a chance and it paid off. So now we move on to the next game. Calling that Gearwolf might have been there, and just using Chrono Jet for the last 2 turns might have actually helped Doryan in the long run. But we have to see what happens. Moving on to the next game.